All right, so Warren Buffett, he has his annual investor meeting. People look at him as being the oracle of Nebraska. This man has made a killing with his value investing. Before we get into his comments on Bitcoin, before we get into the rebuttal, sometimes I like ranking billionaires in terms of how evil I think they are. Uh, do you have any criticisms on Warren Buffett and the way that he has acquired his wealth? Any particular stories of, I know that he's done this and that's evil, or like in a macro, you don't think he's too bad of a character?
Oh, in some vague sense, like I know there are some very questionable things he's profited from, but honestly, I feel like both Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett are a product of the passive investment poison that has taken over the entire equities market. Is that they invest in things that are big because they're big, and literally because we're in this horribly inflationary environment, like everybody thinks that it's just totally freaking normal that somebody who has already risked, you know, 30 years of their life to develop a skill and then find a job and then has worked their ass off to earn their money, that they also have to be an investor to keep their money. They have to earn it like 3 times in a row just to actually have the value. So because everybody is just dumping money into the stock market, equities are literally just a product of this horrible financial system that we're in, where all of your money is eaten away. And because nobody has the fucking time, everybody already spent their whole life learning some trade to be productive, and they've got a job and they've got to work day and night just to earn a little bit of money. They don't have time to be an investor. They don't have time to figure out how to do anything. So what do? They give their money to Vanguard. They give their money to BlackRock, and they don't know it, but they also sign over their voting rights. And then they become $10 trillion um, asset management firms that basically run the whole fucking show. And all of the money, all of the inflation goes there first. So the equities market is just insanely bloated and inflated. And all you have to do is invest in big shit that has that has the least possibility of growing in like a massive way. And it just makes a return. And then they get the credit first. So, and because all the credit is just newly printed money, they get to buy up all the resources and price everybody else. And we have this huge economy that just ever further centralizes, ever further like becomes this passive investment. I finance the current thing. Like it's just this monster of ignorance where you just throw money at big shit because it's big and because it's going to keep its value faster. The equity itself is just going to go up nominally against inflation faster than everything else. And then it's creditworthy because it's big. Like it's big shit that's valuable because it's big for the sake of being big.
I regret that I did a half hour before I brought you on. Because the nonsense
My voice is shot right now.
the nonsense I was saying, and then the 5 minutes of the wisdom you just packed into a 3-minute response there. I recently I was reading this book. Even though like I'm very in tune with the Fed and the entire racket, sometimes when I find a book that with an author that puts it in a good way, I'm like, wow, I didn't even realize that angle on this thing. And so there's this guy named Joe Plummer. I've read 2 of his books. One of them is you ever read people talk about that guy Carol Quigley, who's the historian. Anyways,
it sounds familiar for some reason. Joe Plummer.
I get to not ADD this too much. He was talking about basically the banks have the power of other people's money, which is what you were describing, that we all kind of give our money over to a BlackRock or a Vanguard and we sign over our voting rights. But then the power of those companies that they then get to kind of dictate terms, even culturally, such as with things as ESG scores, it's with our money. Like that, that's what's made them powerful, is that we've just handed them the keys to go dictate the terms on things that they should not have a say in, but we did it because we've handed them the money. It's the power of all of our collective money.
They have the power. They have the power to just direct the economy in some specific direction because they've been completely propped up by the fact that money doesn't hold its value, and that credit, when the instrument of credit is a political creation, then it's a feedback loop, right? Is that if the big thing is more likely to rise in value in correspondence to the new credit being created, like when there is excess risk and the interest rate is forced lower, well then you only want to invest in safe shit. which means that the safe shit is what's going to be inflated faster than everything else. So it's going to have an outsized return to everything, like consumer price indexes or whatever. It's like all the inflation is just stuck there. It's like the housing market, right? Is that because it's a safe investment, housing goes up 40%, everything else goes up 3%, and then quote unquote inflation is like 5%. But the 40% is inflating in the house is still inflation. It's just sucking all of the credit that would go to other things in the economy, real production and real value, that if you had money that you could just store and it didn't lose its value, wouldn't be there. All that capital would not just blindly go into housing. It would get priced out in no time. A house is not a productive investment. A house should not go up in value. It's got maintenance costs. It's you're just sitting on something that somebody needs to live in. We have a homeless problem. Well, yeah, of course we do. Houses are better money than our money. And when you have this thing, you have this special treatment where everybody is just lending not to people who need it, not to small companies that have outsized availability for growth that are potentially going to disrupt some industry, not actual investment, but they just lend to big giant corporations because they're going to beat inflation better because everybody's lending to them. Like, it is literally a self-fulfilling prophecy of, if you create new money to finance a thing, its price is going to go up faster than other things. So it's going to be the only thing. Like, investment has disappeared. Actual investing has vanished from the economy.
And just I guess lend some economic terms to what you're describing. To me, it's all just credit asset bubbles, which is essentially government creates credit for a certain product, and so it just creates bubbles. And what's interesting about the credit asset bubbles is that it's really just a way of enslaving and indebting mankind. Because, for example, right, if they just hand everybody money to go buy houses, and so all houses in tandem go up because you've created a bubble in the housing market relative to the credit that you made available, my house isn't more affordable. I just owe more money to other people in order to have this asset. So it's a really good way to just kind of basically put people in debt.
Yeah, one of the most telling ways to show that what you're doing is you're creating dependency and you're creating slavery. Debt is slavery. It's you owe what you own, quote unquote, to someone else, right? So you're not the owner. Being given a loan is not being given something. It is taking away your future productivity to someone else. So if the best example of this is that they switched in, I think it was in the 80s, actually. They switched from measuring the actual price of the house to measuring the cost of financing the house as the relevant CPI, as the relevant inflation index. So they said, well, people don't own their houses. So what's the cost of going into debt for their house? What's the cost of the bank owning their house and them renting it from the bank, financing it? The fact that they literally just don't measure the price of the house anymore suggests that they know nobody's ever going to own it, because the value of it, the nominal price of it goes up too fast. Like millennials, Gen Z, they got no chance. They don't make any headway.
I think part of why the conversation exists now in regards to student loan debt is exactly that they have to figure out how to almost refinance the home buyers market. And so all these kids kind of learn their lesson of, hey, I don't like debt. And so the machinery is kind of looking at it and going, shit, we got people that are almost wise to the fact that debt is not helping them. And so they're reluctant to take on more debt, and we need people to be in debt. I almost feel like that's and I hear, by the way, that's not conspiracy. I actually hear people talking about that we need to get rid of student loan debt to stimulate the economy, because otherwise you got these kids that won't buy houses. So, I mean, they're not saying it in mine and yours terms of, hey, we have to figure out how to make sure these people remain enslaved, and that we've got like this almost culture that loves taking on debt and where we can create these credit asset bubbles. But that is what they're
basically
saying.
The same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the most poisonous way, the easiest way I feel like to reveal the poison behind it is when you begin to grasp what it means that you are creating new money, you are issuing new money into existence by political privilege, by permissioned bank licensing, that you can create a new loan into existence and quote unquote give it to someone. What you're doing is you're giving money to the bank. Like, so start it from zero. Start it from zero. I have no money. I'm broke. I'm dead broke. But I get a banking license because I know somebody. I know somebody who's politically connected and knows, you know, Gary Gensler, whoever the hell I need to, you know, suck off to get a banking license. I get a banking license. I now have the ability, and there's obviously you know, little sad little red tape of like, oh, you can only do it to 10x however much money you have, blah blah blah. Or even though actually reserve requirements have disappeared essentially since probably around 2009, I think, in a general sense. So you actually don't, a lot of that red tape is actually gone. But I have $0. I invent $500,000 out of thin air and I give it to you to buy a house. What has actually happened? Now, everybody frames it politically. You hear about it on the political stage that you just got a house. Way to go, Robbie. Aren't you so happy that the bank, that my generosity has blessed you with a house? But no, you gave me a house. I was broke. You now owe me $500,000 plus interest. Plus, and who gives a shit what the fucking interest is? I could take a negative 3% interest. I'm $497,000 in profit. I didn't own anything. I owned nothing. I invented money, and then you now pay me a salary for like, what, 30 years? I'm done. I did it 100% because of political privilege. I just bought a house out of the economy, and I even more hilarious, I got to position myself as the good guy.
And make someone a slave for 30 years. Now this guy's entire lifetime is achieving this one asset that he has to pay you for, that because like you said, you're politically connected. You never had, you just turned on a switch, you gave it to them.
Never owned a house.
Yeah. I mean, talk about basically like we don't have kings and princes or whatever in this country, but
we have bankers and paupers.
Yeah, but does that not sound like the king's privilege that you're the prince? Yeah. And so you just get to hand somebody something you didn't have and get paid on it for 30 years. All right, so let's take a look. We're going to go with the rebuttal of let me pull this up. So we had Warren Buffett, he's got his annual investor meeting, and so both him and who's his right man? Unger? What's the other guy's name?
Charlie Munger.
Charlie Munger. So we'll start with Warren Buffett, and then we'll move on to Mr. Unger. They both had comments on Bitcoin, and so we're here.
Mr. Unger. Oh shit, I lost you.
All right, give it a second. I haven't had an internet issue yet, so hopefully that doesn't keep up. All right, you ready? Are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted.
Okay.
Well, I shouldn't answer any questions on the subject, but I will. You know, there's all kinds of people watching this that are long Bitcoin, and there's nobody that's short, and nobody wants their windpipe stepped on. And I don't blame them. I don't like people who step on my windpipe. But I would say this, that if the people in this room owned all of the farmland in the United States, and you offered me a 1% interest in it, and you said for a 1% interest in all the farmland in the United States, pay our group. Well, let's see. It's this bargain price, $25 billion. I'll write you a check this afternoon. $25 billion. Now I own 1% of the farmland. If you tell me you own 1% of the apartment houses in the United States, and you offer me a 1% interest, so I'll have a 1% interest in all the apartment houses in the country, and you want whatever it may be for it.
I can pause it.
This guy is a little bit hard to listen to.
I gotta say, you know, it's funny playing it originally when I was going to do this on Run Your Mouth. I just had the quote which I could have
Mhm.
read within 30 seconds. And now that I'm playing it,
he hasn't
now
even
that I'm
gotten to it.
playing it, I am slightly regretting the fact that that I did the video version of this.
We've committed. We can't go back now. We gotta go 6 minutes and 47 seconds of pain.
Oh, is this no, because there's going to be just two parts. It's going to be two parts. The first part is where he says, farmland and apartments are a productive asset. So we'll listen to that and we'll break that down. And then he
Okay.
turns it evil, where he's talking about uh, how we all need the Federal Reserve, which I guess I'll give a little bit of an introduction here, is because he's invested in the system that relies on the Federal Reserve, and so that's why he's kind of giving you he's giving away why Bitcoin is valuable, and
Yeah.
he's not actually saying it's a bad investment. He's just saying how it destroys what he's investing in. But here, let's give it
He
a
and Charlie actually give a pretty good reason why it's valuable, which is
right.
really funny.
25 billion or something. I'll write you a check. You know, it's very simple. Now, if you told me you owned all of the Bitcoin in the world and you offered it to me for $25, I wouldn't take it, because what would I do with it? I have to sell it back to you one way or another. I mean, they have the same people, but it isn't going to do anything. The apartments are going to produce rental, and the farms are going to produce food. And if I've got all the Bitcoin, you know, I'm back where whatever his name was, who may or may not have existed, was, 15 years ago. If I've got it all, he could create a mystery about it. But everybody knows what I'm like. I mean, so if I'm trying to get rid of it, people will say, well, why should I buy some Bitcoin from you? I mean, why don't you call it buffer coin? Make your own or something. What? Do something. But I'm not going to give you anything for it. And you'd be right, instantly. But
all right, let's pause it there. And I will say, I mean, firstly, where he's just being 100% full of shit. I mean, the $25 example is just lunacy, because obviously an asset that is worth trillions, if someone offered you it for less than that, you go, yeah, I would do that. Also, if he created a Buffett coin, he probably could sell it. But let's go to the core of his argument here, which is if you're looking to preserve your wealth, let's go with an asset like farmland. So farmland can possibly produce grain. So I hand it to you, and you might say, hey, put some of your money into farmland. But what's your take on that, of a person who goes, hey, I should be buying farmland, or I should be buying other producing assets instead of Bitcoin?
Okay, where do you keep your profits from the farmland? You keep it in money, right? Are you going to use a shitty money or good money? That's the question.
Nice and simple.
Like he literally he argues that, oh, it's not a productive asset. Fucking of course not. It's money. Gold isn't a productive asset. The dollars they hold shit tons of cash at Berkshire. Why? Why does he hold cash? It's unproductive. The only thing he can do with it is trade it for other stuff like farmland. Like he's just completely failing to understand like what Bitcoin is. And it's funny, like he kind of alludes, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Like, cause I know we're gonna hit that part in just a second, talking about like the Federal Reserve and stuff. But monetary assets are specifically, like, monetary goods are unproductive goods. That is one of the critical characteristics of it, is that you can't consume it. It doesn't go away. It's durable. Like gold's been, like, we have some of the same gold coins, and 6,000-year-old gold coin, we can still melt down and turn it into a fresh gold coin today. It doesn't change.
And then
Nobody eats it doesn't disappear, it doesn't rot. Like, that's what makes it good money specifically.
right. And then I guess also and something that would be worth, I guess, acknowledging in terms of having this conversation is, if, like, right now, let's say you just got the biggest paycheck your entire life. I don't know how, but this month you just earned $100,000, and you got your decision of, where am I keeping this $100,000? So you might go, oh, I better go buy a house right now while I can, but now you got to, here's the question in a way that I think you got to think about. Well, do you think that there's going to continue to be inflation, that the housing market's just going to be going up forever, and so that at current prices, it doesn't matter because it's just going to be more inflation? Or do you think it could be that they might raise interest rates, and that, things might actually bottom out and you might see some bubbles bursting, which if you do think that, then you would want to be keeping your money in currency. And then it brings to your question of, well, what currency would I rather be in? Is it Bitcoin or is it dollars?
Yeah. And basically right now you have a guaranteed just on like cheap plastic consumer goods, you have a guaranteed 8.5% loss on your $100,000. And if you're measuring it against like things that you would actually want, like retirement investments and housing, you might lose 30% of it. So you're going to get obliterated. Now, you will not be diluted at all in Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin is more volatile because there are many stupid people like Warren Buffett who don't know the first thing about it. And so it's still in its discovery phase. It could lose 50% in the short run. But in the long run, it's not going to be diluted at all. In the long run, it's a global independent money that is not even slightly susceptible to the Federal Reserve Board or their meetings or, a bunch of politicians getting together and signing some shit on a piece of paper that could ruin your life. And it's legal tender in 3 countries. So doesn't seem like a bad thing to invest a little bit in a foreign currency that can't be cheated by anybody. Not being cheated by anybody seems like a pretty valuable thing to own a little piece of.
All right, so let's continue, and now we're going to get into the second half where he says the evil part out loud.
That explains the difference between productive assets and something that depends on the next guy paying you more than the last guy got. Now, net, if you look at it, a lot of commissions have been paid, and there's all kinds of frictional costs that are very real that somebody has paid to a bunch of people who facilitate this game. But
I feel like we really don't have to watch the second half of this. If you give me 1 second, I think I can actually find the quote.
It talks about like paintings or something like at some like for like a minute, and like how like if you have a 500-year-old painting and it's like somebody who is famous, it might be worth something. He drones for a bit. There's like that, one important line that's relevant.
I think the relevant line, and I'll say it while I'm looking for it, but I do think I can find it pretty quickly, is essentially that he says that, do you think the Federal Reserve will actually allow somebody to compete with them? Yeah. Which here, give me 1 second. I do think I have this.
Do you think the United States is going to allow this to happen?
Was that the line?
Undermined? Yeah, they're going to shut it down. He's referring to it in like context of like Buffett coin. It's like, why would they let me undermine the Federal Reserve?
Good enough, because the Charlie speech is shorter, and he kind of makes the same point in different terms. So I don't actually think we need to hear it from Buffett. But as you've already basically quoted it, why don't you respond to it?
Sure. That's why I find it incredibly valuable. That is one of the top value propositions for Bitcoin, is that it undermines the Federal Reserve and it makes your holdings, you are still susceptible to the market. I would much rather be susceptible to the market than to the Federal Reserve. I just don't want to be a slave anymore. I'm sick of playing this stupid fucking game where they just get to buy up everybody's house. I'm not participating. The value of my house has nominally gone down in the Bitcoin price. My house does not go up in value. I buy my house because I need a place to live and because I want a house. It is a consumption good in relation to Bitcoin. So, yeah, it does undermine them. And yeah, they aren't going to be happy about it, and they are going to try to shut it down. But there's no obvious way to do that. There seems to be no way, and everything about how it's designed, everything about how it's developed, everything about how the industry is set up is to challenge that. Is to make it impossible to shut down. What are they going to do? They're going to shut down the whole world's internet? If they shut it down in the US, it doesn't do anything to Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't know. Bitcoin doesn't give a shit. And Charlie Munger actually brings up and applauds China for banning it. Did it do anything? Does my ability to use, like, the price is recovered, the hash power has recovered. The price is like 6x, I think, when China actually banned it, if I'm not mistaken. When was that? I don't know. Like, it's completely nothing happened. One of the largest superpowers and economic powers on the planet banned Bitcoin, Shit still works. Go ahead, do it again.
And the idea that I shouldn't be allowed to, you're basically opting out of the government robbing you via inflation and funding activities like wars that you don't agree with. And the idea that like anybody could take a stand against that, like you're on the side of
How
evil.
dare you?
Yeah, you're on the side of evil if people are going, you know what? I don't want to just keep my money in some asset that can be infinitely printed, that I know is losing its value, and that not only that, but like erodes in like the entire pricing power of the markets because you're distorting, you're distorting the images of. And we don't have to talk about asset bubbles all day, but just fundamentally, you've got something competing with the U.S. dollar, right, and allows me to actually protect my wealth. And then people like Warren Buffett that are invested in the other system will say, well, yeah, the Federal Reserve will shut it down because the Federal, like, you're basically describing, well, I've got an army on my side. I've got the most powerful, I'm a part of the most powerful mob. And with a big smile in front of his investors saying, well, yeah, we're not going to let them do that. Like what you were describing at the beginning of, well, listen, we need this passive investing and everything just to go up because it's your only option. And so he's just like, in a way, he's almost being like, yeah, well, we're not going to let competition like, we're not going to do that.
They are literally part of an actual Ponzi in which they actually are profiting off of everyone else by soaking up the resources in response to a paper printed token, basically a token of political false promises, and they're profiting off of it massively. If the Ponzi scheme actually goes up in smoke, they lose everything because the resources are the actual value, and they know that. They dump the paper to get the resources, to get the actual ownership. So yeah, and of course they think Bitcoin is a Ponzi, or Bitcoin is a threat because they're the kings. They're the kings of that. Like they know how this game works. Like it's money that undermines theirs, and that's a threat. That's a threat.
So now let's check out because his partner in crime, Mr. Unger, when even ballsier in his statements, calls us evil, calls Bitcoin evil. So let's give it a listen, and then Guy Swan with the rebuttal.
This is amazing.
Well, I have a slightly different way of looking at it. I'll sell you something. Well, in my life, I try and avoid things that are stupid and evil and make me look bad in comparison with somebody else. And Bitcoin does all three. and the first place, it's stupid because it's very likely to go to zero. The second place is evil because it undermines the Federal Reserve System and the national currency system, which we desperately need to maintain its integrity and government control and so on. And third, it makes us look foolish compared to the communist leader in China. He was smart enough to ban Bitcoin in China. And with all of our presumed advantages of civilization, we are a lot dumber than the communist leader in China. Yeah, and when 25% of the people of the country...
I think that's all we need to hear. I mean, it's just so... It's literally like actually sitting at the king's table. And so...
This guy praises the Chinese Communist Party way too much. I don't want to touch anything that this guy does because of that. Like, that guy is a fucking lunatic. Have you heard his interview where you remember the billionaire in China that started standing up and saying, like, criticizing the Chinese Communist Party, and he just fucking vanished?
Oh, that's the guy, the Alibaba guy.
Yeah. Charlie Munger literally praised the Chinese Communist Party for doing that and said we should do that here.
That's fucking crazy.
We should be brave enough to do more of that here.
And people clap.
That guy is evil. That guy is
sitting
straight up fucking evil.
You're sitting at the king's table where he's talking about like starving people. And so like they managed to figure out how to get a tree where they could get some fruit off of it. And him going, well, we can't have, if the people have enough food, they might revolt against us. So we're going to have to take, and then everyone's like, yeah, we got to get rid of that tree, and they're clapping for it. Get rid of that tree on the farm guy's land because they might actually become hungry enough. You know what I mean? They might actually have enough resources that they're not starved and they realize what we're doing to their wealth. Like
they just applauded that the market shouldn't decide anything.
Yeah.
That the government and that it undermines the Federal Reserve System. And I find it hilarious that Bitcoin undermines its integrity, not its policies, where they cheat, where they inflate trillions of dollars every year, where they pump out debt and soak up all the resources into the hands of like an incredibly small financial elite. That doesn't undermine the integrity, but the existence of something that has higher integrity undermines the integrity. And he also suggests that that's the value of the system, is its integrity. Well, Bitcoin is Bitcoin because it has perfect integrity. You prove it top to bottom, start to finish, down to the 100 millionth of a unit from the very Genesis block every single time you spin up a node. I turn on my software and I know exactly how much exists. I can run the numbers and tell you exactly how many Bitcoin exist. I can tell you, I can predict exactly how many will be created in the next 10 years. And I know every single transaction. I can audit the thing from the very second that it went live. That's pretty damn high integrity. And the thing has no downtime.
And what he's saying is that without the forced robbing of all of our wealth via inflation, the system can't work. Isn't that an amazing? That if anything can compete, if anything can compete with the currency and that we can opt out, that we're evil because that undermines. Well, then you have a system that's fundamentally reliant on slavery and robbery. And so that's the system that you're defending.
Yeah. You know, at the end of the day, Warren Buffett is what? Like 91, 92 years old. Charlie Munger's like 98. Like Warren Buffett did not buy Apple until 2016. If anyone is listening to either of those, if anyone is listening either to someone who is praising communist China for just outright banning things from the market and making criticism, just anybody who criticizes the Chinese Communist Party, just making them quietly disappear, just fucking killing them. If anybody is praising that, and anybody who went through the entire mobile revolution and waited until Apple was 30 years old to invest a single dollar in it, and you are listening to them about a disruptive tech, about how they feel about a breakthrough technology and the undermining of the Federal Reserve System and a better money, you're not going to make it. You're not going to make it.
All right, let's call it there. Mr. Swan, any last remarks or things that you want to plug?
Listen to Bitcoin Audible if you want to know about the real shit. There's a really great piece, actually. I alluded to it earlier, called "I Finance the Current Thing," and it's all about ESG and the fucking shit show that it is. It's written by Alan Farrington. Read it on the show. It's great. It's absolutely great. It's a great piece. It's like 2 episodes back or 3 episodes or something.
All right, hell yeah! And then I forgot to plug this weekend in Lady Lake, Florida, at the Top Lobster Ranch. We're doing the kickoff party for Summer Port Store. More dates coming soon, including Denver, California, Washington State, and more. Might even have a Virginia one in the work. Mr. Swan, I always forget where you're from. It's West Virginia, North Virginia, something like
North
that.
Carolina.
North Carolina. I know
I can maybe make my way up to Virginia though. You need to stop in. We need to hang out.
Hell yeah, dude. Do a live pod again. That was fun at Childeberg, which is coming up as well. Mr. Swan, always a pleasure.